You're listening to Investigation Insiders by Integris Intelligence.
Hello again, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Investigation Insiders. This is Forhad. I hope you are all doing well and staying safe. We have another fantastic guest for you today, my friend and Vice President of Security at New York-Presbyterian Hospital, Diego Rodriguez. How are you, Diego? Thank you so much for joining us today.
Doing great, Forhad. Thank you so much for having me. It's a great honor and privilege to be here with you.
Same here. So, just by way of background, Diego and I actually first met when he returned to the New York office as the assistant director in 2015, I think. I actually also participated in the Citizens Academy that same year, and actually have a great picture from when I graduated with Diego and my oldest son, who, by the way, Diego just started high school last
Wow.
week. I know time flies.
Seems like years and eons ago, but yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So I think most people know you that listen to this show, but would you mind just giving a broad overview of your career highlights?
Sure. Well, when I after graduating college, really, I was looking for a job and was going to get married, so I became a school teacher. Spent 2 of my years as teaching, which was extremely rewarding, something I really enjoyed. And then I had an opportunity to join the FBI and did, and there's a story behind that. But that took me 26 years later and change to retirement from at least the bureau, and then moved on to the private sector where I had a job in the media corporation Univision, and then subsequently was hired here at New York Presbyterian Hospital as the vice president of security and emergency management.
Yeah, no, that was quick and broad, but there's a lot between those details
Sure.
that. So, where'd you grow? I believe you grew up in Queens, right?
Yep, sure did. In Jamaica, Queens, or Briarwood, Jamaica,
Yeah.
Queens. Spent all our lives there. I think it was probably 57 years ago that my family emigrated from Colombia, South
Yep.
America.
Yep.
I was about a year old, and we grew up, my two brothers and I, in a two-bedroom apartment building in Queens. And thought we had it all there, and it was great. And always brought my daughters back to just show them, how great it was to live, in a two-bedroom apartment, something that they had not experienced before. So.
Yep, yep, no, for sure. And so you mentioned it earlier. There's a little bit of a story. How'd you end up becoming an FBI agent?
Sure. So, uh, like I said, I was a school teacher, and really was teaching nearby where I was living, and so thought I had everything. I was starting my master's at the time. Really enjoyed teaching Spanish, and by chance, I ended up meeting a family friend who was an FBI agent. Again, I'd never met an FBI agent in my life, and he approached me and knew that I was teaching Spanish at the time, and said that the FBI are hiring folks. They're looking for folks that speak Spanish. So I said, "Oh, okay. I'm interested. Let me go ahead and apply," and I did. 6 months later, I was asked to come and follow up in the process. And at that time, I was teaching in a school and that I really enjoyed, really, felt that my career was going to be in teaching. And so I, said thank you, but no thanks. I think I'm going to do and continue teaching.
Yeah.
So they said, "Are you sure?" I said, "Yeah, thanks. I really appreciate it, but I think I'm going to stick to teaching." So then, about several months later, again, second time I run into this FBI agent um, that I met for the first time. Now the second time, he asked me, "So how'd it go?" And I said, "Oh yeah, they called me and asked me to come back and I told him no, that I was teaching, I was going to stick to teaching. And he kind of looked at me with this stare. You know, when you, like, as a kid, you feel you've done something wrong,
Yeah.
and your stomach goes up into your throat. It just, like, at that moment in time, I knew exactly that I had made a mistake. And
Right.
so I think that was like a Saturday. I think Monday I ended up jumping on the F train or E train, took me into Manhattan from Van Wyck Station, and put on my best suit and went back to 26 Federal Plaza and looked for the recruiter and apologized and said, I think I made a mistake. And I was asking for a second chance, basically. They would reconsider. And thankfully they did. And I was able to get a second chance. And obviously the rest is history. 26 years and a half later in the FBI. And what a wonderful career.
Yeah, I mean, lucky for you, lucky for the FBI, lucky for the United States of America. So that's just a fantastic story. And it's interesting how many. Again, you mentioned the fact that you didn't know about the FBI, you didn't know anyone from the FBI, and obviously you're from Colombia, and it's a different background than probably most agents were at the time you were coming in. So it's a completely new thing, probably to your whole family, right? So
Sure.
like and it's amazing how that's how the barrier breaks, right? Like at that time, I'm sure there were other stories like that for many people, and it's really interesting. So in many ways, I mean, you open the door for a lot of people and a lot of agents, so that's just fantastic. So what are some of the things that stick out in your mind about your time at the FBI? I'm sure there's a lot, but if you could name or talk about one or two things.
I think just having, been in the FBI and around the individual agents and really all the employees that you deal with, that sense of mission that, just makes you feel so strong and comfortable doing that job. I don't think, and I use this example all the time because now here at the hospital, overseeing security officers, I tell them that I don't think there was ever a time when I was in the FBI that I woke up and said to my wife that I didn't want to go to work or didn't like work. And to me, that said volumes. And I try to use that same um, example with my officers because I want to create an environment like that,
Sure.
so that when they're coming to work, they're happy to come to work. And to me, that has always stuck. And I think I attribute that to the great men and women of the FBI who are just tremendous individuals.
Yeah, and that's great perspective, Diego. Obviously, as you know, as everyone knows, the FBI has good, bad, and indifferent in the news media and elsewhere. And almost overwhelmingly, as you know, I'm a big fan of the FBI, but overwhelmingly, almost every FBI agent that I have spoken to says the same things that you're saying, right? Different, slightly different versions of it, but it's the same thing. And I think it's also important to listen to this perspective about the people, from people who did it every day, about what it was like and how it felt and the mission and everything like that. So I really appreciate you sharing that particular perspective. So, did you aspire to leadership positions, or did that sort of take a natural course?
I think, it was more natural than anything. I think, early on my career, I worked criminal matters as a special agent. And it wasn't until I started to meet individuals from Washington who kind of talked me into wanting to get into management. And really, I had no intentions whatsoever to do that up until I started to realize, oh, maybe I should try this. And then I spoke about it with my wife, and I decided to do it. And I really, I think I made the right choice. It truly helped me develop as the person I am today as a result of taking that path. I think as a family we became closer and certainly was successful as a result of taking my family on the 7 moves basically that took me around the country during my career.
So what were those? I always find it interesting about like where people have moved around to. What was the like? Where'd you start and bounce around to?
So I was fortunate enough to come back to New York. For me, it was a no-brainer. The recruiter came in to our class and basically said, "For you have to go to New York." And two of us were already from New York. I think we had a third from New Jersey, and then we convinced a park ranger at the time from Wisconsin to come to New York, and he ended up spending his whole career here as well. So so I was fortunate enough to come back and became a part of the NYPD FBI task force here in New York, and learned quite a bit from the greatest detectives in the world, and obviously some wonderful agents as well. And then in about 1997, I was drafted to go to Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico, San Juan, the San Juan office needed some agents. It was hard to really staff that office, and they weren't interested in sending new agents. They wanted folks that had already some experience because of the types of crimes that they were investigating at the time. So I ended up going there, spending a couple of years, and it was there really where I ended up meeting. We had some, met some tremendous friends and had did some tremendous work there, some great cases, but got to meet a bunch of folks from Washington who again just kind of told me a little bit about it and talked me into it a bit. And then I applied and went to Washington for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Then from there, still working criminal matters. Got what we call a drug test at the time. There was a lot of squads down in Miami investigating drugs at the time prior to 9/11, and then 9/11 hit. And as you can imagine, everything changed for the FBI, for everybody, really.
Yeah.
And I ended up coming back as a result to Washington to start the Office of Intelligence. It was 9 of us at the time. The FBI was asked to go ahead and start an intelligence program. Otherwise, they were going to consider splitting the agency into 2. And so it was probably one of the toughest jobs I ever had, because you had to convince a lot of our agents that grew up like I did, working criminal matters, that now we're going to use intel to drive a lot of our investigations. So did that for a bit. I was able to what we call save a move and stay in Washington and work at the field office there in DC, WFO, Washington Field Office.
Yeah.
And spent about 7 years there, kind of going back and forth into senior executive service, and then came back as the SAC for criminal in New York. So I did that, worked some wonderful cases here, criminal matters with, the criminal work in New York, it just doesn't get any better than that. And then had an opportunity to go to Texas, Dallas. I was asked by Director Mueller, and became the special agent in charge in Dallas, spent 3 years there. Actually, my oldest daughter is there now and working at the FBI, still there for a bunch of years. And was ready to retire. At 50, many of us decide, should we start looking for jobs, and we're allowed to retire, obviously, with 20 years in, and I had 25 already, hadn't come in pretty early in my career. And all of a sudden I get a call and said, George Venizelos, who was my predecessor at the time, is retiring. And are you interested in coming back to run the office here? And, being a New Yorker, having worked in New York now a couple of times, it just didn't get any better than that. That to me, that was the ultimate, job that I could not pass up. And so I stopped searching and came back to New York and spent a couple of years here before I retired.
Yeah, no, that's just amazing. I mean, the whole story is amazing, and just the different things that you're involved. It's always hard to tell unless you're speaking in an environment like this or whatever, and to kind of tell how much a person has done. But obviously, that's amazing, and obviously, congratulations on being from New York and then being named the assistant director here. I'm sure there's a lot of people who would have loved to be in your shoes. So let's get into the topic of the show.
Okay.
Leading the security function of a major metropolitan healthcare system during the pandemic. I have to say, I mean, I thought of you and others that I know during the pandemic. Just, it's inevitable being in the security business and thinking about like what it must be like. And I'm glad we got a chance to sit down with you and talk about it. So if it's okay with you, I'd like to just start off with a few questions.
Sure.
All right. So can you talk about the weeks and months leading up to the shutdown in early 2020 um, because of the pandemic?
Sure. You kind of sense it. I don't want to ever compare anything to 9/11, but whenever on September 11th, you go in the city, you get that feeling that kind of
Yeah.
just that sense that something isn't right or whatever. It wasn't right back then, and it's the same thing. Leading up to the pandemic, you just saw the numbers starting to creep up. Being in the healthcare industry, we were starting to focus a lot on what was going on, and then the deaths are just increasing. Something was just eerie and not right, and it wasn't going away. In fact, it was getting worse. So, again, in charge of the security emergency management department here, there were certain things that I had to start paying attention to, and with respect to our teams, their mental health that they might have been experienced as a result of what was going on around them. Not only personally, but then having to come to work, because you got to remember we came to work every day,
Yep.
despite the pandemic, because our mission, requires us to be here, to
Mhm.
keep the facility safe, our employees and visitors and patients safe. So we have to be here on the ground.
So when did you when did you come to the realization that this was a larger issue? Was there a moment or something that happened where you said, you know what, this is about to shift and quickly?
Well, as soon as I'd say around April, about a month or two after, that March, I
Yep.
think it was March 12th when the city shut down pretty
Yep.
much.
Yep.
And that's when people asked me about that. I think I remember talking to a lot of people that summer, and just saying that April and May were just a blur.
Yep.
It was just it went so quickly. I don't remember not working. The hours were very long.
Yep.
There was just a lot of stuff happening uh, that required a lot of attention. And again, it was something that was unprecedented that we had never faced, and so you just couldn't run your business the way you normally ran it. You had
Yep.
to be very flexible and adaptable, which is an attribute that I spoke a lot about to our officers during that time period.
Yeah, well, you just led into my next question, and you alluded to this earlier. What was while everybody else was transitioning to working from home, you and your team were going in every day, right? So what were you
Yeah.
telling them? I mean, what were you telling them to keep them motivated, to keep them, mentally sort of sound and do their jobs every day?
Well, I'm a firm believer, just like I was in the FBI, about mission. And when we hire all our officers, we talk about mission and the uniform and the reason they're here. And to some extent, that sometimes it's a calling, right? That we're here for a reason. And so just to reassure them of why they were here, and that more than ever, what they did really mattered, more so than ever, and that included just showing up, because a lot of times, we ended up, as a result of some changes in visitation, we shut down entrances.
Right.
At one point it was somewhat of a ghost town, because we were just dealing with folks with COVID, and nobody was really coming to our hospitals unless they were really sick. And so it was just a different way to do business. So you had to take a different leadership, uh, posture with respect to how you were going to deal with your employees, because what they were experiencing was something that they had never experienced before. And yet at the same time, you're telling them to show up and do this job, a job which, by the way, 80% of what they do is customer service. So, you're asking them, while everything is happening around them, to really, maintain that smile and make sure you are empathetic to everybody that comes through the doors. But yet, on a drop of a dime, if you need to change that, which is why we always say that other 20%, we really hope that we're training them properly so that they know that they can transition from that customer service to deal with other issues a little more serious, in the sense of violent individuals that might be coming into our facility as a result of anything. So there's still other pieces to the job that they have to perform.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Your teaching background, I mean, kind of resonates with me because, as you talk about it and you talk about leadership and, leading your team, I mean, that sort of like teacher sort of vibe comes off. And, it definitely sounds like, that preparedness is something that was ingrained in everyone from the moment they walk into the organization, right? So did that help? Do you find that it helped, or was this crisis just more than anyone could have imagined?
And look, you kind of heard a little bit about my background and stuff,
Yeah.
you always look at it as, is this a crisis like any other crisis? And it really wasn't. It was like I mentioned earlier, it was unprecedented in every aspect. And so to apply your stereotypical,
Hmm.
ways to a crisis was just, it wasn't applicable. I mean, you had to come up with a new way to address this, because uh, you know, from our standpoint, again, a lot of things, there was so many unknowns. So as a result of the unknowns, that changed how things were being handled. The Department of Health would push forward different regulations, like I said, with respect to visitation. So,
Yep.
one day we're asking our officers not to let anybody, then we're telling them to maybe just let one visitor in. And, when people are suffering and their families are suffering and are, potentially going to pass away, it's very hard to tell them that you can't come in and see them,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
so the challenges that they face, I just, I'm so proud of them because, uh, they really handled that adversity as well as anybody could, despite the situation.
Yeah, that I mean that's just a tremendous again tribute to your people and what they did. It's interesting about like crisis management, emergency preparedness. Like there's manuals and manuals that exist everywhere, all over the globe. Perhaps the ending to every manual now needs to be, all right, be prepared to scrap everything and adjust to what you're dealing with at the moment, right?
No, it's true. It's true. I mean, however, though, the training does come into play at one
Yep.
point, and I think, that definitely demonstrated itself for our
Yep.
officers, because there were instances when we had to do certain things. I mean, we were going to be asked to do things that, we typically didn't, and it was all hands on deck, and we just, I mean, I always, when I came to this industry, I was just amazed and blown away by the employees that work here. And then obviously during the pandemic, it just took it to a whole nother level. And, one of the things that I told our officers to make them feel comfortable and reassure them of what they were doing was right, was telling them, look, the job that we do just doesn't get any better. We are here protecting people, taking care of people that are taking care of sick people.
Yeah.
That in itself, just, it doesn't get any better than that. And so, you try as a leader as best as you can to make them feel good about what it is that they're doing. And so many of them did. They looked at it, through a very, very positive lens. And then there was others that you had to help. You had to help. Not everybody was like that. And I think showing, I know at the time my mom, was in a nursing home, and we weren't able to go see her either.
Yeah.
And I was able to share that story with them. And I think as a leader, we always talk about showing your vulnerable side, right?
Yeah.
It's important to your folks. And I didn't mind doing that at all. I wanted them to know. I wanted them to share. I wanted to share my story with them, because it was I know something that like they were going through, had their own stories, but I wanted them to know that we're in this together, and that we're all experienced this, and together we're going to get through this. And so it was very important to do that with them, and we made it through, thankfully.
Yeah. No, thank God. So you've again alluded to this during your speaking, but I do want to ask this question specifically, just because you've been involved with so many different things in your career. Um, to put things into perspective, right? The position that you had, the responsibilities that you had, are obviously different than anything else that you did before, in a sense. Um, how would you stack this up versus some of the other things that you've been involved with? Not so much ranking, but you know, what did it feel like? I mean, how'd you personally deal with it? Like, I know you, and I'm sure your people are going to appreciate everything that you're saying about them, but I'd like to get into your psyche a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it was tough, and I would put it in a class all by itself, because it was, you
Yeah,
know, um, like I said, I could tell you a bunch of stories in my previous life as in the FBI, and yeah, you can kind of compare and contrast, but I don't think any of those experiences have all the elements of the pandemic, and
sure.
what we went through, and and what I went through,
Yeah,
as just a human being, with my being a father, right, with my children, and dealing with my family and my issues. But then, you know, um, I think part of that was seeing that, I think when something like this happens, we automatically think that we have to make some major changes in the way we do things.
right,
And what I learned very quickly with this, unlike some of other crises that I've had to deal with, that really, we we were not in control, right? And you've heard the old saying, control what you can control.
yeah,
And I quickly realized that I wasn't in control, and wasn't going to be in control. So I better take a different tact on how we do things and go about it, at least with my teams. And I learned that, focusing on the little things really, really helped me. I think that we all already had deep down inside of us, you
hmm,
know, being good to one another, just the things that nobody can ever take away from us were still embedded in us. And I was trying, what I tried to do my best was always to show that side, so that hopefully people can see and say, well, you know what, if he can do it, so can I, or whatever I could do to help them. And I told them a lot of times, this is a job. Again, like I said earlier, it's about mission, it's about the uniform, and a lot of times it's about doing things, that nobody's going to ever thank you for, right? The sign
right,
of a true champion is like they say, being hunched over, sweating, huffing and puffing after you've worked out and done a great job, and no one's looking.
sure,
And that's kind of the analogy I use a lot of times when people are looking for some type of affirmation. Sometimes it's just not going to be there, and sometimes we just need to rely on our inner good to get us through that.
sure. No, I mean, again, that leads right into sort of the next area I wanted to touch base on is, can you talk about what the atmosphere was like at your hospitals from a human perspective? I know you've touched on many of those aspects, but not only with your team, but just like you mentioned, the people that couldn't see their family members, the doctors and the nurses and all the other healthcare workers that were, you know, there every single day. What was it like just from a human perspective?
I saw I saw like a side of everybody, this respect, and some much of what we do at New York Presbyterian is about respect, and we have our respect credo that we go and abide by in and what I say is something we should abide by on and off the field. And just this tremendous amount of empathy to, I know we do that to our patients and visitors, but what I saw transcend more was through to each other.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really special, something that I think people came to the conclusion that, you know, in order to get through this together, we have to be this way with one another,
Yeah.
because it can easily eat you up and make you change and make you feel horrible. And I also we say a lot of times, a lot of it is all about attitude and how you can make a situation good, or you can make it really really bad.
Yep.
And so I saw a lot of people take a really really bad situation like the pandemic and make the best out of it, so that they can get through it. And that's why I say I saw a lot of that respect to one another, that empathy to one another, because at times, depending on the situation, you had to show one or the other.
Yeah, no, I mean that's great. Again, perspective, and it's interesting, and I'm sure you could relate. One of the other interesting things that comes about is like the relationships that build right during a crisis. Like you think about 9/11, you know who you were with and who you worked with, and when you found out and all that, and other things that have happened in our lifetime. I'm sure similarly, this will create those types of relationship for you and your team members, right?
Sure. I mean, there's those bonds that are created as a result of a crisis sometimes, and I see many of that. Certainly for my team, because again, like I said, we came to work each and every day, and saw one another. So you really couldn't avoid not knowing or sharing, the trials and tribulations that each one might be going through. So, and in fact, it was somewhat therapeutic, right? Because,
Yep.
it was sometimes better to come to work so you can talk to one another about what was going on. So
Yep.
it really, in many respects, helped, certainly my team, I think, more so than I thought.
Yep. Yep. Well, this has just been a really fantastic discussion, and I'm so happy and feel so privileged to memorialize this on our show, because again, these are all the other heroes that played sort of a role in helping the world get back, and hopefully we're on our way there. And so usually we end the show with takeaways. So if you had one or two things that you would want people to walk away with from hearing you talk about that time frame, what would that be?
I would say in times, like this that we went through with the pandemic, or any adversity that you face, sometimes, don't panic. Know that we're all equipped, with that inner good that I was mentioning, that can come to the rescue at times, and it's just a matter of making it come out and exposing it, and using it, not only for yourself. Okay. A great example, I go home every day and night, and I have about an hour and change ride home. I think about it. I call my daughters. Talking about positive things, that inner good again, that I was mentioning,
Yep.
helped me get through a lot of things. And so I would say, if there's a takeaway, find what that is for you and use it, because it'll get you through the tough times. And you know, I'm very lucky to have such a great support system in my family, not only in my previous career but now. And I hope everybody can find that same support system. But like I said, just focus on that inner good, because it exists and nobody can ever take that away from you.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, thank you, Diego, for being on the show. Thank you for obviously your service with the FBI, and then your service at New York Presbyterian. I think that again, it played a major role in getting us back, and so that's my takeaway. And so thank you all for joining us again. Thank you for your support and feedback. And Diego, thank you for your time. Till next time.
Forhad, thank you so much, and thank you for all you do in helping message so much of the good that's out there, and the people you bring to these podcasts. So I appreciate that, and look forward to seeing you soon, hopefully in person again.
Yep, same here.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Take care.
Don't forget to follow us. We are on LinkedIn and Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube.